Sorry for the late start. Our main speaker for today will arrive a bit later because it was a bit of a chaotic start, of which I'll tell you more in a bit. I'm Willemijn Verloop. I'm the founder of Social Enterprise NL, which is the national platform for social entrepreneurs in the Netherlands. There's about 3,000 or 4,000 entrepreneurs that are trying to change our society, whether it's climate or whether it's about people, and we link them in a national platform. And we've organized this Climate Colege Tour together with Sungevity, an amazing social enterprise. And we've been doing that for, this is the 7th time already. And the Student Hotel, of course. We're hosted by the Student Hotel. And we've been doing this because we want to highlight what innovation is needed for to change our society. So we highlight people that are exemplary in our society and that have either started an enterprise or been an activist or really trying to make a change and to inspire you guys and inspire ourselves. And this is how we came up with this Climate Colege Tour idea. And so for today, we had asked Diederik Samson, somebody who started at Greenpeace, who became a politician, to talk about his life and impact. But then this is a very special week, as you might all know, because yesterday was the Day of Sustainability in the Netherlands. It's the 10th anniversary of the Day of Sustainability, started by Urgenda. And it was even more special because the day before, Urgenda won the court case against the state, which is, I think, the best news of this week. And actually, we should applaud to that. And we should applaud to Marjan. Because I'm so proud to be Dutch for a change. I haven't been proud to be Dutch for a long time, but the Dutch have actually won from the state. And this is something that's been written about over the world. And I think it's an amazing example, but we'll talk about that more with our guest. But our guest used to be Diederik Samson. But the most amazing person this week in sustainability is Marjan Minnesma, because Marjan has made this court case possible. So what we did is we made Diederik lose his wallet in Vlissingen today. And so he was stuck. No, this really, he lost his wallet in Vlissingen and he couldn't get back to Amsterdam. And he told us 2 hours ago that he couldn't get back to Amsterdam, so he wouldn't be able to be here. He was at the police station, and I would have taken, I don't know what the English word for zwartrijden is. Somebody can tell me that? I think Diederik, being a former politician, wasn't willing to go to Amsterdam without his OV card. But for us, it was good news because we were so lucky that only 2 hours before this event, we were able to catch Marjan, who is the lady of the moment, I believe, in sustainability right now. But she has to come from Utrecht. So the reason we started a bit late is because she's still on her way from Utrecht to here. She's supposed to be arriving any minute now. So I'm not going to tell you much about her because Peter, who's going to be moderating this session, and Marjan will tell you all about that. But to warm you up a bit, we'll start with Peter and Rubium from Sungevity, and Rubium can tell you some wild stories about her and Marjan to kind of give you an idea what kind of woman you're going to get on this stage after. So enjoy, and Peter, take the stage, and Rubium.
All right.
We love improvising, yeah.
We love it. Are you guys happy that Marjan will be here rather than Diederik Samson? Nice. When did you meet Marjan?
I met Marjan. I started my career after school in the Institute for Milieuvraagstukken, Institute for Environmental Studies, which sounds really muf. I don't know the translation of muf. But it was actually a fascinating place where Pier Vellinga was heading that institute. He's one of the most famous climate professors who's somewhere in that picture. He's waving finally after all those years. He did it. And so Marjan and I were researchers there. Yeah, he's there in the back. He's waving to all of us. So that's how I met Marjan. And so we started our academic career together. And,
do you remember the first moment? How was it?
No, I don't really. We were sort of. It was really muf, because we were all sitting in rooms and doing our research. It was also so not me that I didn't last very long, and I left for the World Bank and all sorts of things. And then after I think 15 years abroad, I came back and I sort of re-met Marjan. And that's how we got to know each other better.
And in what way?
Well, it was funny. I came back and it was one of the first days that after living in all sorts of places, I came back. The last place I lived for 6 years in Australia, I came back and literally 2-3 days after I landed back, the phone rang and it was Marjan.
Which year are we talking about?
This is 10 years ago, so 10, yeah. Good 10 years ago, yeah. And did she, I think so. Well, you checked the dates with her. I have a very bad memory. But she said, I have this great idea. The market for solar in the Netherlands, it's really locked up. And it's all, you know, we had the subsidy. The government had started subsidies, and then the subsidies were finished, and then the market stopped. And we had to wait till the next year, and then there was a little subsidy again. And first January, everybody wanted the subsidy, and then 2 January it was empty, and nothing happened for a year. So this was a stop-start market. And she said, look, I think we don't need those subsidies. I'm gonna go, I've been to China, I jumped on a plane, and I've made this amazing deal, and I've just imported, I don't know, 1 million solar panels. And can you please help me, because you know about solar, can you please help me to find a place where I can, oh yeah, she asked me specifically where I can store them in a harbor or something. They're already on the boat. I just don't really know what to do with them after they arrive. And I said, Marjan, darling, I haven't seen you for ages, but I think this is just crazy. This is such a stupid idea. I'm sorry, I'm just speaking out of experience. This won't work. You won't find installers that are going to install your solar panels. And it's really not that simple. You need, and I started just my spiel that everybody in the solar sector told her. And she was like, well, I know this is the right thing to do, and I'm doing it. And if you don't want to help me, then I'll do it myself. And she did. And she was so right, because she single-handedly opened up the entire market. So what she'd done on the back end, she just said to people, look, who wants to buy cheap solar? And everybody was, me. And then she just collected that demand of people. So it was like the first collective procurement.
There was like 50,000 panels or something?
I don't know how many, but it was a lot. So she arranged it, and she got she was just confident that she would get enough people that were interested, provided it was cheaper. And she just went, why is it so crazy? Why is it so expensive? And I do remember that, because I once had done research working in BP Solar. We had a factory where the solar panel went to the warehouse, and then to distribution center, and then to dealership, and then to an installer. And then the installer would take the solar panel in their little van and drive around, and then try to sell a system and then install it. So it was really expensive. And she did exactly that. She went to the factory, she put the panels in a ship, went here and said, who wants solar panels? We all want cheap solar panels. Okay, I'm gonna get them. And then she found people to install those panels on those roofs. But not caring for all the barriers of the rules, or what could go wrong, or, you know, what if, and all those sort of scenarios, because we're all used to do it in a different way. And I learned so much from that. And I was a little embarrassed later, that I thought, like, shit, I could have been a little bit of a hero, even if it was in her shadow, if I just said, yes, I'm going to pick up the phone and try and find a place to store your solar panels in Belgium. So that's how I re-met Marjan, and I've, from that moment, been I've always been a fan of her, but great, great respect for that lady.
The second time sounds a lot less muff than the first time.
Yeah.
After those panels, do you still work together with her? Do you still have projects together with Urgenda and Sungevity?
We've been very close for a long time, because Pier Vellinga was. He's my mentor and a very dear friend. He's also been and always is her mentor and a dear friend. Pier is in Stichting Urgenda. So we've been working a lot together. One of the projects where we started, we were chatting, and she was very annoyed. We have children of similar age, and her children were in a school that have no solar panels. And I have had children then on the school, primary school, that had no solar panels, and we were so annoyed about that. And we said, okay, let's just start something that will make sure that all children in the net, or our children at least, can learn on solar power. So we made it a little competition, which school would be first.
And who won?
Well, I won, because the ASVO school, where Willemijn's kids were as well, they have solar panels. And her school, of her primary school, they still don't have that bloody Wilco, whatever his name is, of the director. He really didn't want it. He said yes, but this is the famous tegenstribbelaars, the people that say yes, but they don't. And she is allergic to that type of people. And it was quite funny, because we started this crowdfunding platform. We said, oh yeah, we have a great idea. We just start children, they crowdfund, and they do sponsor loop or something like.
To fund the panels.
To fund the panels, and then they put the money on the website, and then you can see the more money you have. Oh, we've earned 1 panel. Oh, there's another panel. And
Did
then
it
when you
work
have
out?
10, what?
Did it work out, the idea?
No, Doneer de Zon, it was called, no, it was a disaster. It was really a bad idea because it just didn't work. You know, the children, they sold their art and then they had €42.50, you know, that sells, that solar panels made up of lots of little cell that buys you 1 little cell. So no, it didn't work. It really didn't work. And we tried it for, I think, 2 years. We worked on it and we worked hard. So Urgenda as well, we promoted it and we just couldn't understand. We thought it was so cool. It was such a great idea. It just didn't catch on. And for 2 years we had some people working on it. And I remember that we were talking. We said, okay, sometimes you just got to recognize that stuff doesn't work. And we're both of the kind of really trying to hang on and try to do stuff until it works.
But
Realize
it ended up being another stichting. Foundation, thanks a lot. Foundation de Schooldakrevolutie. Like in the end, right? So in the end, it did work out in some way.
That was lucky because we were there. We just recently talked to each other and we said, look, you know, we just should pull the plug on this this idea that just didn't work out. Because we had, after 2 years, we maybe had 10, 15 schools, among which the school of my children, who had solar. And
her school till today doesn't?
Still don't. I think ask her, but I think there's still this Wilco guy. I think he's still.
Is he here?
With her power. I mean, Marjan. How can you say no to Marjan on the school? So I don't know how this guy said no to her. But anyway, no. And then we said, well, let's pull the plug. Let's just call it a failure and we'll move on. And so we just done that. And then the phone rang, and it was Fijke Sibisma from DSM.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah. I want to, so he called Marjan, and Marjan called me, and we talked together, and he said, yeah, from NL 2025, it's like an initiative with CEOs and people that, influential people that reach the top somewhere in sports or whatever. And we want to make the Netherlands a better place, and we're choosing programs that are existing and that we want to make big with our network, etc.
So your program got chosen.
So he said,
big.
well, and we have done. My assistant has done an analysis of all the programs because we want to do something with sustainability in schools, and we chose Doneer de Zon, your program, and he said, well, you know. We just evaluated and we said, don't choose us because we suck. You know, we didn't get anywhere. This is really bad idea. I'm sure there's something better. I said, well, we actually looked at 15 programs, but all of them suck. No, not all of them suck. I don't want to say that, but none of them is really scalable and big. So, and I said, well, really don't choose us. So from that, he said, well, can we please sit together and make a plan then from scratch? Why is it not working? And what can we, as this network, do to make it work? And this is how the Schooldakrevolutie, the school rooftop revolution, started. Because then we said, well, let's start from scratch. Okay, why doesn't it work? And
now it's working?
Yeah, it's working brilliantly. We started, it was founded 2 years ago.
And how many schools do we have now?
Well, I don't like that question, Peter.
Okay, then we go to the public. Marjan is coming in a minute. And I would like to know from you guys, what topics do you really want to talk with her about? Because we have some time to know from you guys what you really want to know from her. So we can skip that when she's here. So we can go into the real essential topics you want to talk about with her. So raise your hand if you've got something. So we just investigate a little bit.
The first one I'd like, she just won this court case again. There's one higher court where the state might go.
Yeah.
And I would like to know what she expects there.
Okay. If she thinks they will win again.
Yeah, so my question is, when I talk to people about the fact that she won this case, a lot of people are like, well, what is the government going to do if they don't stick to the rules? You know, are they going to get penalties? So I want to know more about that.
Yeah, okay. I heard something about like that they're at least going to charge like millions. Yeah. But I don't know. We'll ask her. Other hands. That's a lot. Otherwise, who wants to, yeah. What do you want to know of Marjan?
Well, she once told me she sleeps like 3 hours a day. She has like the energy, the amazing energy. So I would like to know more how does that work? I mean, I think she works for like 3 people in one. So I think it's interesting to learn how that works.
I like that a lot. How do you get to sleep only 3 hours a night? What are the topics?
What do we do now? Like after the report last week, we have to...
you mean the report by the IPCC?
Exactly. So
everybody familiar with that? Just to check. Who doesn't? 1.5 degrees, we need to focus on that.
Yeah, so it's great we won the rechtszaak, the court case, thank you. But then again...
Woo! Hi.
Dankjewel.
You've been introduced 3 times over, so we're not going to introduce you again. So we're going to go straight into it.
Okay, fine.
Marjan Minnesma. Very welcome. You just arrived from...
Yes.
Where did you come from now?
I came from Utrecht, where I have spoken to about 110 top managers of Heineken.
And what did you tell them?
To move on and move quicker.
Nice. We will get into why and how everything. Can you fix a headset for Marjan? So you will have a headset on, you will have a seat, some water, and...
Would you like to drink anything else but water, Marjan? Wine? Or,
Well, I have to play hobo tonight, so I can better not drink.
that will be a nice
I
concert
did not
then.
rehearse enough this week, so I will have a problem anyway. And with more drink, it will be more difficult.
We're talking private now, anyhow, hobo, your hobbies. There was already a question coming up from the audience. Some people know that you sleep not a lot and that you're quite productive. How many hours a night do you sleep?
Well, this week, not too much. Well, on average, I try to do 5 hours. But on the day that we won the climate case, it was 3, and because I then had to get up or to leave at 7 because we had a day of sustainability yesterday, the 10th day of sustainability. So then I was in bed at 4, and well, short night.
And you woke up at 6, 7?
Yeah, something like that, and without breakfast.
How do you do that? We can sit down.
That's just luck.
What do you mean, luck? Your body just is able to do that, or do you have any tricks?
No, no. My mother is a midwife, so she used to do deliveries of babies, and usually that's at night. So she would do 3 at night, and then during the day she would need to do visits of women who just had a baby, say 10 after each other.
So you had a mother who was not sleeping at all?
No, well, a little, sometimes not at all during some nights, and I have inherited her physics, I think. So that's just luck. I've had boyfriends who needed 8 hours, and then I try to do 8 hours, but then I don't have a good mood because it doesn't work for me.
I was really hoping to get a trick from you, but it doesn't work like that. Okay.
No, it's luck.
It's a special week with a very special moment for you. Let's move to that moment first, because it's so recent, and I'm talking, of course, about the moment that you knew that it was won again, the case again, in the appeal. How was that moment?
Well, it started around 10 o'clock, and we were sitting at front with the lawyers of the state and our lawyers, and my Professor Vellinga, who is the chair of our board, and myself, and we were sitting next to each other, and they would start like, we do not agree with the lower court, and I said, oh dear, that the European Treaty for Human Rights was not applicable. So we think it is applicable. So I have to get the English words, EHRM. So we do think that human rights are here breached, and therefore if you don't do necessary things, you do something that's not allowed, and therefore that's a problem. So I thought, okay, maybe this is the sweet thing to start with, but then probably he will say, well, there's a climate law coming up, so it's not necessary anymore. I was always waiting for the negative thing.
Why?
And, well, because you prepare, for me it was a bit 50-50, but you prepare for the negative because then it can only be better. So I was waiting for the negative thing, and then on 2/3 or 4/5 he said, well, there is a duty of care, and the 25 to 40% is what industrial countries should do, CO2 reduction. And I thought, oh, this sounds really good. And I was like, so I was watching Pierre, and he was like, and we were watching straight to those 3, what's the word?
Judges?
Judges. And they didn't show anything in their face. So it was really not clear whether they were happy or not, or they would look like that. So I was waiting all the time for the negative thing to come until, well, very late. And then I thought, and then I really realized, oh, we're going to win on all fronts. And then the tears came up. And I was watching to Pierre, who also had a bit wet eyes. And then one of the two lawyers who is working with us was also not looking very cheerful. So we were all like, whoa, because it means so much also for many people in other parts of the world who try to do climate cases and who know that if we win, they have more chance to go on. So it's so much more than only the Dutch case. And if you've worked on it for 6 years and you know so much about what's going to happen if we don't move quickly enough, yeah, those 3 judges do, they did an incredible verdict. I've read it now and it's really, really good. You must notice there are 3 people there who're not into climate change at all. They get piles of papers from both the state and Urgenda. You have to read it all and then see what's the real truth. Yeah. That's very difficult if that's not your normal habitat, because a lot of that is about science and about urgency and so on and so on. And if you see what they did and the way that they made their choices and how they argumented it, I think it was really an excellent job. We must be very glad that we still have independent judges who think for themselves, who don't believe what certain people say and don't listen to framing and all those things, what you now hear after we won again. And it's really very, very good verdict. And both the lower court and this court are conservative courts. So it's not that they are kind of action courts or something like that. So if they say, well, Urgenda is 100% right, and it was really on all arguments that they said the state was not. The
whole package.
It was like fletch. So until the very last word, I was waiting until he really said, well, we don't agree with the state, and so Urgenda won. And then everybody was clapping and yelling, and there was many people around said, we've never heard that in a court, because you have to be quiet until the 3 judges leave the room. But everybody was yelling.
There was just too much tension.
Yeah,
too much.
It was. And then there was a big, positive feeling all around in the room.
And are you still on that wave?
I have not had the time yet to read all the messages that I got, because there were hundreds from, say, people from my high school to people from former orchestras or former jobs, because everybody watches what the main news items at TV. And
is there some of the reactions that comes to mind that you did read, that you touched you or felt special in some way? You refer to the international context or someone local.
There were many, because I did read some. I'm also in a kind of women's network of high-level women who also all fight for climate change, and they were really excited because they're all working on these topics. But also like a school teacher who said, I'm really proud of you, and you probably don't know me anymore because you were, I don't know, 13. I said, well, I do know you, and then you see how many people follow you. I don't know. I know I have some followers on Twitter, but many of those people are not on social media. But somehow they do follow what you're doing, and it also helps because although say normal people who are not into climate change, they all say, "I also worried. I have taken 10 solar panels." So you see that the great big movement of people, the normal middle-class people, are worried and they do want to do something. Yeah. So that gives you also the hope that we might move quicker than we currently do.
On the climate case, there might be a possibility of the state appealing again. And I heard some reactions that they say that it's like a principiële kwestie. Yeah. You probably know what that means. That the state, or actually that the judges are sitting on the chair of the state and that they should not do that. That was kind of a reaction. How do you feel about that reaction, and how high is the possibility that the appeal will come?
Well, the reaction is nonsense. I expect that they do want to go to the highest court, and in this highest court it's not about facts anymore, it's only about whether the law has been applied in the right way. So it's in that sense more what they want. But when we won the first time, we also offered to the state, well, if you only have this principal question, then we can go straight to the highest court. You don't have to do this middle thing, what they just did. Because there is a way, if you have a principal question, to go straight to the highest court. And then
you offered them?
Yeah, and then we would have been ready within half a year. So then then we would have been ready in 2016.
And
but
why?
they didn't want to do so.
Do you know why?
No, because say for the outside world, they say we do want to do the verdict and we're going to take action, but it's very principle. But if you see what they did in the past few years, they just fought us on every little thing. So they play another role for the outside world and in the media than they play really in court. And they wanted to go and try to fight every detail, which they did. But if it really was principle, they could have gone to the highest court immediately. So they
It's kind
refused.
of framing more than what they
So
did,
it's
no?
framing, and that's what they now do again. They say we are going to do what's necessary, but it's very principle because they were in our chair.
Yeah.
Well, we were not in our chair, and the judges were neither. Because if we as citizens go to court and say there is a duty of care that has been breached because the government should make sure that we are safe here, and this government itself has said, well, we should do between 25 and 40% CO2 reductions in 2020. And the judges clearly said, well, the 40% that we wanted most is maybe necessary, but that's a political question. But the 25%, the lowest level, that's what I guard. Here, that's my role as a judge, that say the minimum level of safety, you can come to the judge and say, well, please help me because the government is not doing what the government itself has stated is the necessary level. So this norm of 25% is not invented by the judges. And they don't say what the government has to do. So they are not on the chair of the government. They're not saying close coal-fired power plants or drive electric or whatever. They only say this is your norm. So you should stick to your norm. Like if the government would have said, well, dikes should be 2 meters high, we only want 1, then we can go to court and say we want 2 because that's what you said is safe. If you say it's unsafe 1, then we don't want to live here anymore. So I think that many people who are now in the media saying that the judges on the chair of political people are either not reading what we did, so ignorant, or, and I think most of them do know what we do, but they just want to frame it in this way because that's easier than saying I don't want to take care of my citizens, I don't take my duty of care, and I want to go on and don't move too quickly.
Cool. Before I move for some questions to the audience, to wrap the climate case up to if they appeal, what is the chance that you think Urgenda will win again?
Well, I think yesterday, 2 days ago, I thought it was 50-50, but now that we have won again, I think the chances are quite high that we will win. Particularly because the new thing was that the court said that this human rights law is here really applicable, and that's not doing this, and this is the highest level of law, which is straight into our national law, and if you don't live up to it, you're not okay. And that was not in the first verdict, so the two together make it stronger. And so I think the chances are now much higher to win.
That's good news. Cool. Who has a question for Marjan?
And if there are no questions, I can tell nice stories about Diederik.
We will come to that. We have a picture coming up even.
I almost don't dare to ask the question now because, you know, nice stories are always good. I was wondering, there's also another court case going on with Milieudefensie. Do you think that because, well, Urgenda won, is that a higher chance of them winning as well against Shell?
I think it does help them because of this human rights issue that has now been covered already. So they can say, well, human rights are breached, and that's for them helpful, that they don't have to prove that anymore. But it is a different case because we say there is a duty of care, and this duty of care is only there for the government. The government should protect us. And because the government is also the one that should live up to the Climate Change Convention and all the things that are said in these circles. And Shell is clearly saying, well, we live up to the law. If you don't want us to use oil or gas anymore, then make a law that oil and gas are forbidden. But we are doing something that's according to the law. So it's more difficult. And what Milieudefensie now tries to do is what, say, the earliest people who tried to fight smoking or tried to find asbestos did. Because it took quite a while, sometimes 30 years, before they finally won. The first cases were very often lost, because what you try to prove is that the general situation in the country has changed so much that it's really immoral and also illegal, are two different things, to do things that are against your health or whatever the claim was in those cases. And it usually takes some time before things change. So I think that is a more difficult case.
You actually not work, but you did your thesis at Shell, right?
Yes.
Which year was that?
93, 94.
So, okay, who knows this videotape? You had it in your hand, so what's happening here? No, this is the videotape that leaked through the correspondent. It was a videotape of the date, you see it at the right corner, 91. So that was before you joined Shell. A videotape about climate change, about the concerns within Shell. So Shell knew all along. That's basically the story. And the correspondent republished it a while ago, a year or something. So that was quite an international happening as well. Did you see that movie when you were in Shell, or how did you?
No, I graduated there, so I did something different, and I thought at that time I'm going to change the world from the inside. That was very naive. So after a year I thought this is not going to work because I have to become 50 before I make a change, and that takes too long. So then I went back to university and did some other studies. But this was not an issue there, say, at lunch or whatever. But there were certainly groups within Shell who knew this and who also made those videos, also educational material. So that's funny because they gave it to schools and all kinds of people. And then later it all disappeared when they really realized what they were saying, I think. But I didn't see it at that time. Okay. I heard about it later.
Okay. Any questions on this topic, like Shell and connected to it? Yeah?
Maybe.
Wait a minute.
Hi. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, my question would be maybe so what should companies do? Because I was triggered by your remark that I thought I could change from the inside, because of course we're with all the large corporates and we've got some good frontmen like Paul Polman and Fijke Siebesma who are taking that role, but then of course they have to get that whole organization with them. And what is your take on that the role that not only governments but also big corporations can and should take?
Yeah, I did some research the past 2 years on the industry to see what they could do to go for 100% renewables in 2030, because that's really what's necessary if we want to stay below 1.5 degrees, not 2050. So I visited all the big corporations that are the main ones that have a lot of CO2 and other greenhouse gases emitted. But all of them have measures on the shelf that they could take if we really want it. So even Tata Steel could make steel without coal and with hydrogen, for example, or work together with the chemical industry who emit a lot of coal monoxide, which is Tata Steel emits a lot of coal monoxide, which is the main material that the chemical industry uses. So you could have the waste from one is the raw material of the other. But if they want to make the change, they need to make large investments. It's really a major overhaul. And what they are afraid for is that if they do that, that their products will be a little bit more expensive, and that the ones who didn't do it are cheaper, and the ones who buy are usually the people who buy the cheapest. So I asked them, for example, in the case of steel, well, what do you think if you move to steel based, for example, on hydrogen? What will happen? Well, they say, then my steel will be more expensive, so they will buy steel from the Chinese. And I said, well, what does it really mean for the end product? And they, well, a car will only be 50 euros more expensive. But it's not the consumer that makes the decision, but the car maker. So I would think we should then try to make cars 50 euros more expensive and put all those amounts in a fund and then help with this fund, Tata Steel, to make the change. The same goes for cement, the building material from houses. Houses would be about 65 euros more expensive if we do that in a more sustainable way.
The whole house, you mean?
Yeah.
65?
Yeah. So in the end, if you look to the end product, and I think that that would be very useful, because then you charge the consumer. And the fact that we buy so much is one of the problems, that we emit so much. So you should not focus on the citizens, but focus on the consumer. And if you would make those products, which are quite expensive, a little bit more expensive, what is 50 euros on a car, what is 65 euros on a house, and put that in a fund to make sure that the companies who want to make the change can cover the difference between their competitors, then you can make the change in another way. It's actually another way of doing a CO2 tax, but then without asking that the whole world needs to do it at the same time, blah, blah, blah. I think that we could do this regionally or nationally.
This could start today. Why is that not happening?
Well, because I think they have not invented this yet. If you look at, well, the government gets advice from a few institutes, and they say, what do we need to do to cover the Urgenda verdicts? And then they make lists, but they are old-fashioned lists that have been there for 30 years, and they're not new things on the list. No. For example, what I said this week, if you buy a house in the Netherlands, you have to pay a little bit of tax, overdrachtsbelasting, which has been lowered in the past few years. Well, I would say make it higher again and say everybody who buys a house, 500,000 people a year, gets this higher tax, but if you make your house energy neutral within a year, you get it back. Yeah. I would think that that helps all those people who are speculating, do pay the high tax, but all people who are real decent citizens and who really buy a house and make it energy neutral get the money back, and that will cover 2/3 of their costs.
This sounds so easy. Nice. Just a check for time, because we started a little bit later. It's 5 to 7. We're thinking about going on until 7:15. Is it okay for you to start with?
Well, my orchestra starts at 8, so...
Are there spaces available to join for your orchestra as well, or?
Oh, this is not a concert. This is a rehearsal.
Okay. So for you guys, 7:15, we will close it up. If you need to leave earlier, you're free to silently leave. Yeah, it's all right. There was another question on companies, right?
No, not
or on something else.
How do politicians who are climate skepticists, which we have in our coalition, have you had a reaction from them?
Well, the funny thing is, in our coalition, they all say we live up to Paris, which says that you should prevent 1.5 degrees warming. They don't know what they say, I think, because if you really want to prevent 1.5 degrees warming, then you should stop with using oil, coal and gas in 2030. But so far, they have all said we live up to the Paris Agreement.
What's happening here then? What's the difference? They say they're doing it, you're saying they're not.
No, because they have translated it for themselves that it is 49% reduction in 2030. That's a long way. They probably are all not in Parliament at that time. So they can say anything. And if you look at what they really do, the CO2 emissions are, since 1990, not lower at all. They are just as high as they were in 1990. So every year you get CO2 additionally in the atmosphere. So we are not lowering emissions at all. The other greenhouse gases have lowered 13%, but that stopped 6 years ago. So since we won, nothing happened. Since Paris was signed, nothing happened. So I look to what they do and not to what they say. And they say we live up to the Paris Agreement, but if you look at what's really happening, the emissions are not lowering.
And what if you tell them? What is their reaction then to that point?
That they are the greenest ever, and that they have a climate law in the making, and that they really are trying. Yeah. We're very good at saying some things, but we're not as good at doing it.
Talking about action, you worked at Greenpeace. Your role there was campaign director, is that correct?
Campaigns director, yeah.
Yeah. And in that period, Diederik Samsom was one of your... He was in your team, so to say. So you were the boss of Diederik Samsom.
Yeah. That's why I have nice stories.
So, this is the moment where we've been waiting for.
Well, when I came there, I was in my early 30s, which was really strange to be the campaigns director, because that's, say, the content part of Greenpeace. But I have, for my laws degree, I did my thesis at Greenpeace International. So for them, I was acceptable as campaigns director, therefore. And Diederik was already working there for quite some years, and he was then about, I don't know, 25. But from the whole climate and energy department, yeah, a lot more hair. From the whole climate and energy department, he was by far the smartest and the most creative. So at that time, we also had a nuclear campaign, and that was his profession. He studied nuclear energy and so on. So he was very, very strong on that topic, and he had invented that the buses that the police use were really thrown away and put at a scrap without any dismantling or at all. So he had invented, well, why don't we buy them at this scrap and then put someone on with a police thing, and let's drive up to the nuclear reactor where there was at that time were plans to do something. So there was really a whole cordon of policemen, and we were in those buses from the scrap. I mean, that's this, and we could drive through because they thought we were colleagues. And then we ended up straight at the nuclear reactor, opened the doors, and then climbed up with all kinds of typical Greenpeace things. Well, that's Diederik. He's always inventing new things, and by far the cleverest, but also the most creative one. Very often also for other people. So I've worked with him very pleasantly, and he knows a lot about many dossiers, also the ones that were not at all his topic, but he would follow everything worldwide, and was also quite creative in inventing things. Once we had was a big conference going on in Denmark about the nuclear waste, and in Sellafield in La Hague there is a lot of nuclear waste going into the oceans. So he had invented with some inventor a kind of camera that would be a robot walking on the floor of the ocean that would show how much nuclear would be coming out of those pipes into the ocean, and that we would project that real life above the entrance of the conference hall. And we did it. And that was really new, and like nobody, no regular firm would have those things, but he just found someone who could make it, and we put it there on the ocean and made all those special camera things. Well, it was very high tech, and it all worked, and it did make a large impression, and we think that people were going into this conference differently by seeing this and getting, of course, also a flyer with material than if you would only go in just from your hotel and I have another meeting.
Yeah, that's cool stuff. Someone might have prepared a question for Diederik. So if you have a question, you know him really well, so you can, let's say, phrase his answer. Who got here with a question for Diederik? Yeah, I'll get to you. Okay. And you can also imitate his voice if you want to, but I'll leave it up to you.
I'd like that, yeah, definitely. In light of the transition from gas to electricity in the Netherlands, so all houses have to switch from gas to electricity, one of the expectations is the government will lower the taxes on electricity to make it more attractive for people to transition fast. So if you also, well, I'm wondering if you also think that might be the case. Then the follow-up question is, what does that mean for the solar business? Because of course it will become less attractive to buy solar panels if the electricity is really cheap.
So one, is it going?
Yeah, I have understood it. And I'm also in this business, so I could answer as myself as well, and then hope that Diederik thinks the same.
So are you first going to do the Diederik answer, or is it?
Well, Diederik is now leading the table on housing. I would say that we have a slight difference on timing and so on, but what they have said in The Hague is, that sounds really logical. Let's make electricity a bit cheaper and gas a bit more expensive, and then people make the move. But if you look really into business cases, what's happening in the country, people who do joint solar panel projects and so on, it's really not very handy to have a lower electricity price, because then all business cases are dead, and then people won't move and scale up. So I would say leave the electricity price at the same price. If you want to help people with less money, do it in another way. There are different things that you could do as a government to help people who do not have much money. And make the gas more expensive is a good way. And in that way you create a fund that you can use for anything.
You're big on funds.
Yeah, well, we need money to make the change, but it should not land at the citizens. It should land somewhere in a joint fund, and then we can make the move together. And I think that you should tax the things that are related to consuming. So therefore make sure that we consume less and start to think about, well, lending, borrowing, doing other things than only consuming.
You're saying keep electricity at the same price, so don't lower the tax.
Keep soldering.
Yeah. And Diederik is going to say, lower it. What's his argument to lower it then? And why don't you agree?
Well, because Diederik is also from a party that takes care of people who do not have so much money, and he thinks that if you make gas more expensive, that people will get angry, and therefore he needs the story that it's cheaper at the other side. And I think we should tell people, well, we can make your house completely energy neutral, and your monthly cost will not be higher. I think that's just as good a story, but it's a different, what's behind that is different from make gas more expensive and electricity cheaper.
Yeah.
So I agree with him that we should make it easy for people to make the move, and we should not make it more expensive, but I think you can do it in another way.
How do you make it, let's say, we have a lot of things to do, right? If you look at housing, there's a lot of people who need to do something with their house, either having a rental house or owning a house. How do we get all these people to move to a sustainable, energy-neutral house?
Well, if you look at the houses in the Netherlands, then the largest group of houses are the houses in rows, under one roof, and single houses. So those are the groups of houses of usually also the people with relatively more money than the people in flats and so on. So those groups are the groups that are relatively, there's large numbers of those houses, and they are also the houses that use most energy. So I would start with those groups of the people that are able to do what's necessary. And then in the end, say, on average, you would need 35,000 euros to make a house energy neutral. That's what we do with Urgenda. So it's not something I've invented, but we've made more than 100 houses energy neutral for that amount.
It's happening already.
It's happening, and that's the amount that someone spends on energy in 15 years. So if you somehow would enable people to have the 35,000 euros, pay for a house without an energy bill, and then they would pay back this 35,000 euros in 15 or 20 years' time for the same amount per year, per day, per month, as what they now spend on their energy, then they don't have higher costs. The only thing we need to do is make sure that there is a fund from which people can borrow this 35,000 euros. And I think pension funds would be very good for that.
Because they need to get some money away from some dirty industries anyhow and move it somewhere else.
Because they are the only ones who have billions and say that they don't know how to spend it in the Netherlands. So if you would connect them with an organization that can do loans for citizens, because for pension funds, they don't want to leave their bed for less than 100 millions. But if they would cooperate with someone who can do that, then we can spend their money on the good thing, and they would have it back in 15 or 20 years' time, even with a small amount of interest.
Still, there is then a large group of people who need to make that choice. So they really need to want it. Or do you think the fund in itself will move everything easily?
Well, I think politicians should tell the story that we really need to move within 15 years. So there are some natural moments in which you can make the switch. When you move to another house, when your CV is broke, and at that moment is the moment to switch. So we shouldn't force people to do it in an unnatural way. But when you are making big changes, then also change your energy system. And if we make sure that we can have the financial system there to make the switch, then I think if you tell the positive story over and over again, then we will make the switch. And you can start with the first for so many 100,000 and then million, and you don't have to do them all at the same time.
With this soft approach, also 2030, no CO2 emissions anymore is possible.
I don't think it's soft, because I think in the end you should say, before 2030 we will stop with CV. Okay. We will stop with cars that are not...
the natural process of you don't have to say now,
yeah, but
change everything.
Well, you do make very big choices and say, before 2030 we really stop. So that is a big choice, but it's not tomorrow. Yeah. I think if people know that they have some time, that it's less difficult to make the switch.
Cool. Any other questions? I will get to you. You're the English speaking, so I'll pass you the mic.
First and foremost, apologies that I'm apparently the only non-native Dutch speaker.
So good.
My question relates to stories actually, and because they are powerful, they are definitely powerful. And like when you consider the COP in Copenhagen, and definitely people failed, campaigns failed, and the whole conference was a failure. Paris was a success, let's put it like that, hopefully, at one point. And your case is also a success story. What do you think was different to other cases? And what was your biggest learning from all the years of fighting?
It's a lot of questions at the same time. But, to start with your first remark, that storytelling is very important, I think you're very right. And that's what happened between Copenhagen and Paris. The Climate Bureau was then led by Christiane Figueres, and she just did that, telling positive stories all the time. Everybody was depressed after Copenhagen, and she was like, no, we're going to make it. And somehow she got, with her positive energy, everybody in another mood. I think that's incredibly important, and we should not underestimate what she did. Just by telling the positive stories, getting people working, and that Paris succeeded was an incredible work, and I didn't expect it. So I think it is very important. And I did many things that did not work out, and learned a lot from that. So, for example, in 2008, I had the first electric car, and I thought if I now go with 50 different big companies and I try to buy electric cars together, then maybe they will be cheaper and then people will move faster. So I had 50 companies lined up and they wanted to buy thousands of cars together, and then 2 ministers said, we want to join 600 cars for the government. And I thought, nice idea. And that was the stupidest idea I'd ever had. Because then they said, but if we buy cars, you should have an international procedure and you should have all kinds of... And so we had a law firm coming in and another advisory. And it took 2 years only to make the documents so that we could do the international demanding for electric cars. So after 2 years, all those companies said, well, we're going to buy cars ourselves. We're not going to wait anymore. So from that I learned that you should try to do the beginning of a project with the smallest group as possible. And once you are ready, you can invite all kinds of people. So with the climate case, it was only 2 people who made it. And then we asked 1,000 people to join us and be co-plaintiff and so on. But if we had tried to make with everybody and then given the legal documents to them and say, what do you think about it? We would never have been ready. So start small and try to do as much as you can with the smallest group, and then when you're ready, try to make other people enthusiastic and go on. And I have had that a couple of times. So we did in 2010 the first collective buying of solar panels, apparently in Europe. So we ordered 50,000 solar panels with everything around it, 10 megawatt. But I did it with only two men. And when I was ready and the website was ready and people could order, then we started to reach out and say, do you want solar panels for the lowest price ever? And then we had thousands of people who said, yeah, we want to do. And we bought the 50,000 solar panels for thousands of citizens. But if we had tried to make this project with a larger group, I would never have started, probably.
It's interesting. When you say start with a small group and then scale it up, when I hear you say that, I think of our national climate agreement that's including like everyone.
That's why it won't work. And particularly in this phase where we are in, we should now see that we are already in a kind of emergency situation. In emergency situations, you're not going to sit around a table with 200 people and say, what do you want to do?
So do people feel the emergency then?
No, that's the problem.
And how do we get ourselves, people, everyone to feel it?
I give 200 speeches a year to try to inspire all kinds of groups of people and tell them that they should move quicker and go to 2030 zero and not 2050.
Okay, that's what you do. If we, let's say, we were 200 people, there are different approaches. You can either join a company, build your own social enterprise, you can join Greenpeace. What is your advice for people, let's say, a bit younger, who are eager and want to do something?
Well, I think we need everybody, and you don't need everybody in Greenpeace, but you particularly need everybody at different places telling your colleagues, we should move quicker. I have a lot of new knowledge, and I know that what we are doing is from the last century, and we should now move to the next century. But that demands a kind of courage, because you are not mainstream, usually. So you should tell people around you, well, and then you should find a way in how can you convince the people around you. When I was 20 or 30, I could say different things than what I can say now. Like when I was 20, I couldn't tell 100 of men of 50 plus, you should do this and that, and they would look at me like, okay, young girl. But now that I'm a bit older and have some experience and won a climate case, they think, okay, maybe we should listen. So it depends on your age what you should do. And the good thing about younger people is that you can go as younger people to CEOs and look them in the eyes and say, I'm going to live 50 more years. What you do is not good for my future. And then it's different from when I say it, because when I say it, they think, okay, that's Minnesma, she's into sustainability, and see that. But if as a student or as a group of students, you go to a CEO and say, it's my future, why do you still do this or that? Then they feel very uncomfortable. And I think that's good. They should feel uncomfortable and move out their groove and start to do things differently. And I think that's what you very good can do when you're younger, demanding change from people who are now in power. Because when you are in power, it's already too late. So what when I also give a lot of colleges at universities and so on, and I usually tell people, I'm not going to ask you to change the world, you should kick ass, that's your job. And of course, innovations is everything we need, so it's very nice if you're going to work in all kinds of jobs where you invent the things that we need. But in the meantime, the ones who are now in power should move within the next 10 years. So you should make sure they move. And that demands a kind of courage, and maybe you should do it together, but you cannot just go on until you're old enough to change, because then it's too late.
We're approaching the end. Let's do some final questions, quick answers, for anyone who still wants a question. I saw a hand here.
Yeah. Back to the electricity transition. Like people say that if we move to electricity, we don't have clean electricity. So it will be even worse than the situation right now, because now we at least have gas, and that's worse. That's not worse than electric power.
Yeah, we should make a few changes at the same time. So if we wait until we have 100% renewable energy and then start to buy electric cars, and then we are too late. So in the beginning, you might have an energy neutral house, and at the same time, we might not have 100% renewable energy. What you can do is start to buy your energy from a 100% renewable energy company, because that gives them more chances to buy what's necessary. But we have also looked into what's necessary to make the change before 2030. And we need in every municipality 9 windmills. So look in your municipality, what's the most ugliest place, do 2 rows of 5 windmills, and that's enough. But if Amsterdam says we do 200, then the Isle of Texel can say we do nothing. We need 9 solar panels per person. That's not too much, I would say. And if on this building we have 200, then you don't have to do anything. But it's only 9 per person. And we need about 4,000 big windmills on the North Sea, and there's enough space for that. That's all we need to make the whole energy system energy neutral. So to have all the electricity we need for industry, for cars, and for houses. So 9 solar panels per person, 9 windmills per municipality, and 4,000 windmills at sea. That's it. We can do that.
Doable.
Yeah, of course.
Last question. I go to you for the last question. Short question, short answer.
Because, well, it's not such a short one.
We need a short one.
If you have all the energy that you want, that you need, you don't have it distributed yet, one. And you don't have
don't have what?
You don't have it distributed yet.
Yes.
And the most important, you don't have it at the moment when you need it. And that brings me to the question I had prepared for Diederik. If we make now new cities without gas connections, we actually step away from the power to gas option.
Yeah.
What's your opinion about that?
My personal opinion is that we don't need the gas or the hydrogen for houses. We need hydrogen for the industry. We can make houses energy neutral in many other ways, and we don't. And if you see how much we need for the industry, we don't have the luxury to use it for other things as well. So I think we should use the hydrogen mainly for the industry first. Then, of course, there's sometimes that there is no sun and no wind, but there's other periods where there is a lot of sun and a lot of wind. So at these periods, you should make your hydrogen and maybe make the hydrogen into ammoniac, NH3, whatever. So make sure that you have something there, that in the periods that there's nothing, that you can make your hydrogen or whatever you have used into electricity again. Make sure we change the system as well. So you should regionalize, and maybe you have sometimes local batteries, maybe you have sometimes local water, which you use for small systems and so on. So there's hundreds of different solutions to make sure that we don't need to enlarge the system as much as when you really would only look at, well, now we have so much coal and so on, and we use all electricity and keep everything the same, then we will probably have a problem. But if you change your system and regionalize and make sure that you have regionally hydrogen and other things which you can make into electricity again at the time that you need it, have the so-called smart grids. If we have 1 million cars on the road, you also have 1 million batteries, use them at the right moment. So there's a lot of changes that we also need to make, but we can do that. In the study we made, we have used all this knowledge as well, and we can still, what I said, do, including the whole system change that you need to make. And it costs us about 1 to 1.5% of the GDP per year if you look at the total amount of afschrijvingen.
Depreciation?
Depreciation, yes, thank you. So we can do that. 1 to 1.5% of the GDP is what you need to make the changes in the houses, in the mobility, in the industry, and in the energy system. That's all we need.
It's really doable. We probably need you maybe in a position where some other people are now, or how do you see that?
I think at this period of time I'm more effective in my current place. But maybe when I get 60 or older, might change positions.
Thank you so much for being here.
I hope it was not too much of a disappointment and that Diederik will come another time.
No, for me personally, it's a true honor to sit with you here. I think you're a true hero. And thank you so much for bringing up the topic of courage. I love that a lot. And we have something for you, actually 2 things. This is something that we were not able to change during the short notice that we had. So you can open it up already and
give it to Diederik.
Or do whatever with it that you like. And we've got something else. This is because you don't sleep a lot. You probably have a lot of time to spread the love and drink wine. So this is for you as well. We will take a picture.
Send it to Diederik.
Yeah, that's perfect. Everybody, thanks a lot for being here. There will be drinks in the Coms. That's a restaurant at the other side. So please go there if you feel like a drink. Thanks a lot for being here. And have a look out at the social media if you want to get here for the next event. Perhaps with Diederik, perhaps with someone totally else. Who knows? Thanks a lot. Have a good night.